Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. We've got a great conversation today with our own AI expert, Jordan. You can tell by the beard he knows what's up. We're going to talk about some of the hottest topics in AI, some of the things that we're facing as we explore AI in the lab and in the solutions that we're working with hands-on. We've got a lot of new things to talk about there. And this is the first podcast that we're actually integrating live with our Discord. So we're bringing in our Discord community to be able to interact, ask questions while we're doing the live. We'll try to get to those questions as we go. But for now, Jordan, thanks for doing the pod. Appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to be here and glad to be back on the podcast.
Yeah, let's start with FMS, because that's where you and I were last together in person, where the sloths were the talk of Santa Clara. We were running a demo out we were running a demo out there showing AI vision. And this is kind of one of the topics I want to get into as we go. Some of the undertones is that what AI means to one person is not a universal definition. We've got generative AI, which is the hot thing with ChatGPT and DALL-E and some of these other things. But there's so much more, so many things that used to be called business intelligence that are now rebranded as AI. But the Vision AI bit really had people talking on the expo floor. Talk about what we were doing there and what that means in your vision of what AI is.
Yeah, so that's actually, you started off with a really good point there. There's a lot of misnomers that you see going around, floating around on the internet of people thinking, AI, and in their head, what they're actually thinking of most of the time is what's called AGI, or artificial general intelligence. They think the computer is actually thinking and making rational decisions, where realistically what we've got going on today with the generative AI side is basically fancy autocompletes or neural networks for generation. And then what we were working on at FMS was computer vision, which is a subset of the broader AI, right? And we had a model running, a public model running on our server doing some object recognition. So the way that those work is you train your models on massive image data sets. The name escapes me right now, but there's a couple standardized ones that have been out for some time. You can do further fine tuning. So like if you work in a manufacturing industry, let's say you work at an automotive plant and you make water pumps for your cars and you want to have some sort of AI quality control. We've been doing camera style quality control for quite a long time. The interesting thing that we're seeing now is the industry starts to adopt this stuff more and more for production, is we're able to kind of almost preemptively do the quality control as the assembly lines go. So you can have multiple things tagged in different ways using neural networks instead of kind of some of the more legacy logic. And then another thing you touched on there.
Well, before you leave that real quick, I mean, we've all seen the factory lines of like making canned peas or something, and if the can's dented, the thing just like flicks it off, it gets rejected and goes into the waste bin or repurposed or whatever. I mean, that I guess was a early primitive form of this. Is this can properly shaped? Yes, no, and then kick it out.
Yeah.
But when you talk about what we're doing with the Vision AI bit at FMS, it was doing object detection. It was funny. I thought the funniest thing was as we progressed through the day, it started picking up all the beer bottles at 5 o'clock as soon as the bars opened up in the expo floor. So the model you were using was really general. Is this a bottle? Is this a backpack? Mm-hmm. Is this a purse or whatever? Eyeglasses? We saw dozens of different things pop up on there. But could you tune it even further if you wanted to and had enough camera resolution to say, that can is a Coors Light, that can's a Lagunitas if it was me. Can you get that level of detail to really tune this for, I want to know as Anheuser-Busch at an event, what are people actually drinking?
Absolutely. And that's kind of where I was going with the business intelligence side of it, right? Where we're seeing, we've evolved now from, my can is dented on the factory line to being able to classify multiple things in an image and not just detect just if something is incorrect or not, but also be able to detect and categorize different things. So our model was more general. So we had, teddy bear, and we
Hmm.
had can, and bottle, of course. But with proper tuning, like you said, proper resolution stuff, we're actually starting to see a lot of retail-based companies for loss prevention start tracking the things that come across, like the self-checkout, and tying that in with the scale weight data and
Right.
tying all of those things together. But they're investing massive amounts of time in creating the training data sets for those models, right? So in in kind of a optimistic kind of way, saying something like all things are possible through AI as long as you have a good enough, big enough data set and a big enough GPU to run it on. Um, which kind of brings me to one of my next things that I actually wanted to talk about, which is the actual creation of training data, and how I'm
Hmm.
not seeing a ton of stuff in the market right now that's focusing on that. Everybody's talking more about, oh, here's all the cool stuff you can do with the model. I'm more interested in it. How do we get there? What's that roadmap looks like? And I think that's kind of where we're seeing the off the shelf chat models like ChatGPT Enterprise, for instance, was recently announced, is getting a lot of traction because it kind of helps bypass and sidestep a lot of that initial training and other data creation and normalization that you need in order to be able to work on these.
Well, I mean, you're getting at one of my pet peeves now is that the AI world, and I said it at the beginning, is like different things to different people. When you talk about creating this data or creating the models or whatever, there's a giant chasm between the HPC installs, the top Fortune 100, and what they're doing, and what some small business, some small retailer, some small manufacturer is doing. And there's quite a bit of gatekeeping that I find moderately offensive. I understand it, I get it,
Mm-hmm.
but I can't tell you the number. You've seen it on our social posts where we're talking about a workstation with a couple A6000s in it, and we'll get some people saying, "Well, that's not AI. That's whatever." It's like, well, a lot of AI starts out on notebooks because most organizations can't dump $1 million into. Dell's got these beautiful XE9680 servers, 8-way H100s, which you wrote the
Beautiful
review
servers.
on. You love that system. We all love
Yep.
that freaking system, but that system is unobtainable for the gross majority of the enterprise. And so I think there's a conversation to be had here around both what you're talking about, tools to democratize the on-ramp to AI, but also how do we leverage the right tools for the job. And we're going to get into some of that too around cloud GPU instances, around workstation, around actual dedicated GPUs. Like I said, the XE9680 or even the two 4 by systems from Dell that we just saw. We've got a nice, like a 30-minute plus video coming on YouTube for that. But I don't even know if I really have a question there. I just have a frustration that I'm
Yeah.
venting, and I think you're seeing the same thing as an AI practitioner. I mean, you're actually in there doing this stuff. But is anything I'm saying sound ridiculous to you?
No, and I think that's a lot of the challenges that a lot of industries are facing when they're looking at this, and everybody sees it as, oh, new, exciting, shiny toy, right? Let's all get into it and let's roll it out and be the first one. And I think Morgan Stanley is trying to just put out a press release. I don't know if they actually implemented it or they were saying they were starting to implement a chatbot for interacting with your portfolio. Which, I mean, I
Okay.
that's kind of hey, you know what? I'm really interested to see what they do with it. I think that'll be more helpful, especially getting speed to questions.
Hmm.
Coming from a background in finance and customer service, getting the answers to the customer quicker is the name of the game. Even if it's just getting them to the right person to be able to help them with uh, their inquiry, either on the phone or through a chat portal. Getting them to the right person as quick as possible is paramount to improving customer experience. So in those types of scenarios, yeah, these chatbots are great, and if you can have natural language conversation backed by routing logic, you can get increased deflection rates in your contact centers. better handling times because folks get to the right person at the right time. You call the bank and you say, I got a problem with my debit card, and the machine hears, oh, and they send you to the credit card department. Well, they can't help you with your debit card. They got to transfer you again. So now you've just wasted a bunch of money
Well, and that's
of
everyone's
human
biggest
time.
frustration, right? Is how many
Yeah.
times in the old days you would pick up the phone and mash zero until you hope to get to a real person that can help with that decision tree. With a chatbot, the mashing zero doesn't necessarily work because you can type representative or human or whatever 1,000 times, and the chatbot's designed to not accept that, right? It wants to try to resolve it,
Mhm.
and we've all had bad chatbots, and I guess have we had good ones yet? Have you been impressed with anyone's customer service bot to this point?
I had some hands-on experience with AWS has a contact center plugin for theirs that utilizes their chatbot, and it had some pretty powerful connectors in there.
Okay.
You could, of course, set up logic that the first couple of times people say, talk to a human right away, it'll kind of press them into trying to, hey, if you can just tell me what you're call, like what you need, I can
Yeah,
try
give me something, right?
help
Give me
out.
something to
Yeah,
respond
give
to.
me something. But yeah, I think there's always going to be that subset, and I'm probably included in that subset of the population that I don't think any of them have ever been any good up to the date, and I haven't had one good to interact with myself outside of some sort of open source kind of proof of concepty stuff for things like Chat GPT. Um, I think you and I were playing around with it when we were on the plane, actually, and we got some AI running on the laptop on the plane on the last flight we had
Yeah,
together.
see, it
And
could
we
it could
had
be
it.
it could be done,
Yeah.
senior AI gatekeeper. You can do this stuff on a notebook, but carry on.
No, absolutely. But I mean, we saw, getting just using the GPT-4 API and having some sort of instruction following and some directive in there. We were able to get some pretty impressive results by giving it a goal and then allowing it to kind of go out and accomplish that in the same vein that I think the name is Auto GPT is one of the
Yeah.
bigger ones out there. I know there's a handful more. I saw a guy the other day that he he caught his automatic. I can't remember the exact name of it, but he had his own instance running and using the thing, and he interacts with it via texting with the AI. And I guess he had caught it looking at some adult websites or something, trying to do research. And so these things that brings us kind of full circle back to what we were talking about enterprises and their reluctancy to deploy these things in some of the larger ones is getting them on to stay on the rails and getting them to do what they're supposed to do. You don't want your credit card company chatbot going off talking about the weather for 45 minutes with someone.
No, I mean, this brings up such a big question that I'm reluctant to even posit, but I've been seeing more. I was just at an event a couple weeks ago looking at, or I was watching an AI panel, and there was a professor from NYU that was speaking about the inherent biases in technology, and as you would expect, I mean, the typical things of is technology racist? Is it bigoted? Is it whatever? Does it favor one culture or society over another? And you and I were talking about that, and I think it's kind of what you're talking about here. Is if you say to your AI model, go explore the internet and get smart, and then come back and be aware of these things, it's going to touch everything it can and
Yep.
pick up some flavor of culture that could be hyper extended in any direction, right? I mean, there's
Mm-hmm.
no if there's no barrier to where it goes and the information it consumes, then it could look at ESPN and be a sports jock kind of AI persona, or some other media. It doesn't make any difference. But
Yeah.
you're getting to what you're getting at is there is a need to make sure that the data going in is quality. And I think that's part of the concerns that enterprises have is I want my chatbot to be good. I want to expose it to relevant information, but not too much information where now I missed some sort of security check and it's sharing Jordan's account information with mine because we have similar interests. And that's not good either.
Right. I mean, security threats. I've worked in that field and done a couple analyses of how that plays out through long context conversations. So there's of course that, but touching on what you were saying before with inherent biases in AI, that's a hot topic right now, and getting the training data properly together and properly put in there is paramount. You need a very diverse group working on doing that. And I say this being fully self-aware of, we work on the internet and our platform is the internet. The internet is a garbage cesspool of nonsense most of the places out there.
Yeah, I know. I've been on Reddit. I'm aware.
Yeah. And so if you don't take care in your selection, which is an absolutely mammoth undertaking for something like an LLM, if you don't take care in your selection, getting the proper training data or even that proper fine tuning data is a real challenge right now. Being the one man band here, working out of the lab with just our silly projects. I mean, we've seen some things we probably shouldn't talk about, but we've seen some pretty interesting results come out of just finding random data sets or hitting a Reddit API to yank down a bunch of information. We've seen some pretty interesting things happen.
Well, no, let's talk about it. I mean, part of that FMS demo was running an 8 AI Doom server with a ninth system on a laptop logged in. So this was one system that was doing all of these things. And I don't know exactly, you tell me what you told it to seed for Doom video game players, but it wasn't long before I'm sitting there at the booth, I'm looking at the chat on the laptop that's observing the game, and the 8 AIs are talking so much trash to each other. We had to turn it off for a little bit because it was a little uncomfortable, to say the least, with what these.
In my defense, it was a
they're
really
invisible
good.
guys. They're invisible AI gamers fighting each other and making anatomy jokes. But yes, in your defense, what?
In my defense, it was really well implemented Doom online chatter. And for those in our audience who played that,
yes, I'm not going to disagree that it executed the mission. It understood the assignment, as it were. Okay.
Yep.
So that's part of the thing too, is making sure that the assignment is right.
Yeah, and we may have been a little too fast and loose, and that kind of comes up to the conversation of ethics and AI, right? You play a little too fast and loose with your assignment, with your rules, and you end up with stuff like our AIs and booths in front of thousands of people telling each other to blank themselves.
I was both proud of our deployment and somewhat embarrassed at the same time. I mean, it's like we said we were going to set up a Doom server, which we did, and it executed it quite flawlessly. But that does highlight the point of, it's not as simple as garbage in, garbage out, but there is definitely an underlying tone of what are the limits and where do I want this thing to go? And I think that's part of why as I was saying before, most of our chatbot experience has been either rough, somewhere between rough to terrible. I think there's a general reluctance by the enterprise to give these things more information because of the unknown. The fear of the unknown is going to hold back public interfacing AI in the enterprise, I think, for quite some time.
I've had conversations with other enterprises about internal use chatbots. A chatbot that knows all the policies and procedures, and you can ask it if you're a marketing guy, you can ask it a question and find out if it goes for or against your company policies. That's the dream, right? To be able to have an assistant to sit there and help kind of expedite, especially as organizations get massive, like so many are. Those things and those folks can get hard to track down. Who do I go speak to about this particular thing? And having all the data sets containerized into an AI model or a model that has access to be able to search those, and where the conversation ultimately leads is, but there's some stuff that SVP of marketing can have access to and know about, but there's things that a remote support phone agent should not
Right.
be able to ask questions about finance protocols for expensing private flights, or just something completely arbitrary, right? Like that,
Yeah,
but that's
but
ultimately where the
role
question
based
always leads.
access. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we're
And
going to have a
so
whole new category in Active Directory for your level of AI access within an organization, right?
and
Seriously, like
that's
that's
exactly where I was heading with that. Is it's not just as simple as Active Directory role based right now, and getting to somewhere like that would be great. Um, I would, I mean, having, I think the path on that would be path of least resistance, at least on that to explore would be having it be the initial interaction give the AI as part of the initial prompt your levels of access based on some Active Directory stuff, and have it work that way. But even then, you start talking about things like prompt engineering. So we start looking at stuff like Nemo guardrails, getting that to be into a spot where it can handle permission based stuff would be a really cool thing to see. Um,
well, you were
Beyond
talking
just
about, but
keeping things, yeah.
even on the prompting bit, I didn't know this until just recently. In organizations that have aggressively invested in AI, that's a job.
Mm-hmm.
Just writing the prompts is a full-time job that never existed before. This is, I don't know how common it is, but there are certainly people out there that are paid full-time to help their organizations or help their people in their organizations write well-constructed prompts. And it's not just like, we've all interacted with ChatGPT by now, I think most of our
Mm-hmm.
audience has. And you can say, write me a sonnet about, this person that talks about flowers a lot, and it'll go do that. But if you're trying to get at actionable business insights and having it create something for you, you have to, I don't know if it's talk to it like a 6-year-old, but there's some sort of level there where sometimes you even have to be repetitive or ask it questions to make sure it is giving you back what you think you're giving to it. It gets to be a lot more complicated than just write me a poem.
Yeah, I think your Chat GPT thing is really actually a good metaphor. It's representative of kind of where things are heading, especially less complex models, right? So
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time with it for help with everything from, hey, how do I make this email make me not sound like a jerk, to I need some help with this code because I'm getting this error and I don't know where it's happening. And, depending on exactly how you ask it a question or exactly how you prompt a question, right? So if you think of it as a task completing fancy autocorrect, and you start and think of it less as a like a touched on early, there's so much confusion over, Chat GPT's AI, and people think it's an AGI, like Data from Star Trek or the computer
Right.
from Star Trek, and
Right.
it's really not. In So if you fundamentally understand something like that, it becomes a lot easier to work with. And if you have context about your company's own model, whether it's a chatbot or some sort of LLM or some sort of generative AI, and you're the prompt engineer, the reason why you're seeing these jobs getting posted for obscene amounts of money is because it does take a long time to understand how those work under the hood to be able to get them to do what you need to do.
Yeah, yeah. No, it makes sense, and the world of challenges that AI is opening up in organizations, again, which is why I go back to some of my frustration that you talked about some of NVIDIA's tools. They did a release last week on some new LLM support with software they're open sourcing, and we can get into that a little bit if you want.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you've had time to play with it hands-on yet, but still, I think as an industry we could do better to help democratize these tools. I think a lot about ChatGPT again because it's such the obvious one that a lot of organizations are reluctant to use it because there's no privacy there. If you use the public version and you pump corporate data into it, there's no guarantee of anonymity or privacy with that data, right? So it's hard for an organization to go hard on that. Plus, it stops. Its data set is what, 2021 or something. So it's a little bit older, and it's trained to do what it's been trained to do, not necessarily what you want it to do. So what is the on ramp for some small business, small enterprise that wants Chat GPT like functionality across its internal assets with maybe some public websites or whatever that it identifies as relevant? What is the on ramp for an organization that wants to do that, and do they have to go staff up, a couple $1 million in an AI department of people, which are hard to find, to go run something like that?
So I think you actually hit the nail on the head there. The on-ramp looks like getting something set up internally and interacting with something like ChatGPT 4, having a few really good initial prompts set up for it, for how it's supposed to help you and what it's supposed to do. A well-skilled veteran engineer could get an Azure instance of GPT-4 and have it plugged into a Slack bot, where anytime you mention the Slack bot in a channel, it's able to respond and answer questions and help you do stuff. Even if it's just as simple as, getting, help me reformat this Excel table, or help me clean up this company-wide announcement, easing into it and having everybody make sure they have a full understanding of what they're getting into. I think with something as simple as that, as a Slack bot, is far more valuable than trying to dump in head first, right? Because you quickly start to understand the limitations and the actual practical uses of these things, other than, write me a poem about Brian's wonderful salt and pepper hair.
Well, how dare you? So what's the well, so think about it this way. If I'm use Salesforce.com, most organizations use that for their CRM and sales funnel. If I want an AI model that analyzes that data and comes back with because we know salespeople are notoriously awful at making their own sales forecasts, so that's why it's a lot of lick finger and stick it in there and hope for the best. But an AI model should be much more rigorous, or could be much more rigorous in that process, assigning probabilities and coming up with a, salesperson one, your predicted sales target this month is $28,325, and we can give it that rigor. Is it on the business to be able to come up with that model on their own, to be able to take advantage of that and to make their sales process smarter? Or is that something that we should expect Salesforce.com to create and say, give us your parameters, we'll certainly not a value add, we'll charge you, $10 a head a month for this AI tool that all it does is help you understand and better predictively analyze your sales funnel. Like, where do you think, based on what you're seeing, where's the pressure or where's the innovation going to come from?
So I think that's a kind of a complex question, right? So you've got to look at your own particular use case as a business. If I'm a 50-person shop selling repair services across like a Cincinnati area or something like that, use the Salesforce built-in one. Use Google's Google Sheets built-in stuff, right? Get your feet wet, get in there. I don't think everybody needs a custom model built out right away. But if you're somebody like a financial institution, I don't think you want to wake up one day and see a headline of Chase accidentally bankrupted, because they turned on
that's
an
the
LLM
fear, right? I mean, we talked about that.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. I don't know why I'm so stuck on this, but as a practitioner yourself, what do you think small businesses can do? Where do they start? If they've got some IT generalists, they're not ready to go all out on AI, but they want to understand better how it can impact their business. What's step one? Is it certifications? Is it training? Is it downloading Llama and hoping for the best? Like, where do you even start to peel back this onion?
I think a really good place to start, and I'm kind of hearkening over to the chat here. One of our readers has said that they started using ChatGPT for their work, and I don't know if they're paying for it out of their own pocket or their company is, but I mean, I would encourage a lot of companies to give your IT guy or give your dev a budget for
For AI
open
tools
AI,
in
sorry,
general,
open
right? Yeah.
AI, yeah, the APIs, right? So every time you make a request, it costs money. Luckily, you don't pay too close attention to the Amex bill, so we haven't had that problem yet. But um, yeah,
Well,
you
here
get
before you go
even
too
the
deep
free
on that,
tiers. Yeah.
but yeah, before you go too deep on that, I want to talk about the levels of access to ChatGPT because I think you're right. Maybe the easiest on ramp is to start by consuming the tools that are publicly available in a safe way
Mm-hmm.
so that your data is
Yeah.
not exposed. So everyone knows that there's the OpenAI ChatGPT that's what, up to 3.5, that's publicly available. You log in, you can use
Yep.
it, it doesn't cost you anything. Still has certain limitations. What are the paid versions of ChatGPT?
Yeah, so you can pay. I think it's about $20 a month, and you get access to GPT-4, which is
Okay.
far. I mean, it's almost like the difference between talking to a toddler and at least a 10-year-old, right?
Okay.
It's obviously smarter than that, but that's kind of how I would describe it. Is it's that next step of being able to follow instructions, being able to do things. Now, with that being said, there's still stuff like I've got access to the API side, and I can call. There's different models. When you start getting to the API side, you add a credit card. Monitor your billing. That's the first thing I'd say because
Just
I've
like the
definitely
cloud,
done
right?
some things. Yeah, yeah, and it's exactly that because you're paying per token on there, and it can add up really quick on some larger projects, especially if you're automating the interaction with it. Um, when you get onto the API side of things, you get access to a handful of models from OpenAI, which are pretty decent. They're good at different things. There's some that are better at writing code. There's some that are better at being creative. There's some that are better, like Chat GPT-4. You have a API version of it, which is I found to be far less restrictive and more compliant with my requests, if that makes sense. Let me clarify that when I say more compliant with the request, if I ask the chat version of GPT-4 through the web browser, hey, I need to write some code to, print out a list of, 35 grocery items. It'll kind of sometimes it'll give you like a start of, oh, here's how you start that in Python. And then it'll put like an ellipsis and a comment that says, and keep going here. I found yeah, I know. It's like, what the heck am I asking an AI for if it wants me to
Right,
do
yeah.
it myself? Like, the first time I ever saw that and kind of ran into that brick wall, it was really frustrating because it was like, what am I doing here? But when you move over to the API side, you start getting into a lot more freedom with it. And then you can start using vector memory databases. I use Pinecone a lot in our lab,
Can
to
you
help
can
kind of with
you
the long-term memory.
can you give it more data sources because like the native, as we said, the
Yeah.
native ChatGPT database stops at a time in 2021.
Yep. So then your next step would be going and getting an Azure GPT, for instance.
Okay,
If you
so
can
that's what
make,
I'm just thinking
yeah.
about, like in a small business, repetitive tasks like marketing emails, or even in our own, we do a weekly newsletter, right? So right
Mhm.
now we go in and we manually get the headline and a summary and a link and whatever. It's repetitive. It's one of those tasks that's really ripe for automation. If I can't go to ChatGPT public free and say make my newsletter for the week, with a sassy attitude because it doesn't know that our content exists and I can't tell it to go crawl the site. What level of integration do I need with OpenAI to enable that kind of activity if I really wanted it to go make me the weekly newsletter in a sassy tone?
So I think you got to look at that as a couple different things, right? So the
Okay.
content generation side of it, that's where you would go to use like the OpenAI API or the either your private instance on Azure. This is something we see a lot too, is like the implementation and over use of AI. If you the only tool you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail, right?
Sure.
But Where that starts to get interesting is if you look at it from kind of a full end perspective. Now we've got a weekly batch process that runs on our server that goes and pulls all the links and everything, organizes it into a preset prompt of here's all the links, and it pastes those. So you're not doing all of that on AI, but you can start automating your process of, you know, collect all the links programmatically with some sort of bot or auto-sys job type thing, send that through the API with the request, and then you get back your text, and that gets delivered to your inbox for approval and then blasting. Okay. So, you know, that's a really good use case, something I hadn't fully thought out. That would be how I would do it.
Well, that's the other thing too, is there's a lot. There are many ways to go after these things. Yeah. So we've talked, a lot about all sorts of topics today. One that I don't want to neglect, though, is hardware. And we're obviously hands-on with a lot of this stuff in the lab. Mm-hmm. We've got a project right now. We're working on workstations that have GPUs inside and need to access the data. And that's one of the big things, right? And not even GPU direct storage. I mean, that's cool and all, but that's a step even further down the road of integration from a infrastructure standpoint. When you think about what workstations are doing, where some of these data scientists are doing that initial workload, the systems themselves don't have a ton of storage, despite the one that we just built with 200 terabytes or 300 terabytes. That's very rare. Getting access to more data, though, helps train the models more faster. Yeah. What are the challenges you're seeing there as we're exploring this in real time?
Yeah, so we're doing we've got a piece coming out about this soon. So there'll be a lot of detail in there. We're doing kind of a free tier of that, right? Where we're using single GPU workstations and doing kind of some research level model training and model inferencing for testing and validation. So when you start talking about being able to keep your GPUs fed and keep those, keep your ROI going and having either shared or leased terms through your developer team to some really powerful GPU workstations or GPU servers, keeping that stuff fed is one of the most important things. You don't want your GPUs sitting idle, especially with the cost of something like an H100.
Yeah.
Right. So when we start looking at something like, I think our box is something like 80 terabytes of Gen 5 PCIe and VME in there. And we have that shared at line speed. We're at, what would be the equivalent of a Gen 5 drive in each of those workstations at 80 terabytes. So you have massive access, instantaneous access to all of these, all of this either training data or validation data or data that you want to go do an inference on to do the validation of your models, and having that not only centralized for things like version control or making sure your dev team's all working on the same things, but also being able to parallelize. I'm sitting here working on a model that's slightly different than a model that you're working on. But we're working off the same data set to see who can come up with the same thing, that iteration. Yeah. Getting all of that stuff, and especially like the really compelling thing about the E1S is that's one U in the rack. Each GPU server, when you start sticking in, like 4, 8, whatever GPUs, you're looking, minimum 2U, right? For the Dell liquid cooled. If you're not doing liquid cooling, you're at to 4U. In a lot of scenarios to get more than one GPU in a rack. So each instance you're sucking up a lot of space to get these parts in there. And I think the XE9680, is that a 6U? I can't recall exactly how big that was.
It's a 4U for the GPU server and a 2U essentially power edge sitting on top of it.
So now we're talking about, we're sucking up so much rack space just to get the compute going. What are we storing on it? It would be extremely expensive to outfit all of those servers with 80 or 100 terabytes worth of storage space.
Well,
and
they
then
don't
you're
even,
still talking about
if they even have the slots, right? Because that's the other thing is the GPU heavy servers often give up storage. Or you can look at a general purpose server with 24 bays, but then you're restricted on 2 add-in cards because you've got no power envelope. I mean, it's the hardware right now is a series of I would say intelligent trade-offs to understand what you need, how much power your rack can even support. You mentioned liquid on the 9640, and again, I'll plug the upcoming video. We have a monster video diving into Dell's latest GPU servers. Kevin and I were down in Texas last week looking at those guys. And but ultimately you're right. Having fast shared storage so that you can have direct links to your GPU servers, to your workstations, to whatever, I think is going to be a pretty compelling story. And the server guys, the software, and the SSD guys and NVIDIA with the NICs too, are really all trying to figure out how to bundle that and communicate that to the market right now. And just what you're seeing on the E1S drives, they're actually Gen 4, but they're still extremely fast and wickedly dense. And the servers are so powerful now that we can keep inferencing cards in there. We're using an A2, but you could put 2 of them in there, I think, a couple L4s if you could even find them, which is the next challenge with any of the NVIDIA cards. Now we can inference on that data without moving it again, which is pretty conceivably powerful stuff.
Yep. And not to mention, like we had talked a lot about creating the training data early on is a big challenge. Having that kind of stuff unified in one spot and a server that has power to do the normalization and standardization of that. You can't just hold up a PDF and say, here, AI process. Like there's stuff you got to do to that. So being able to do that on the file system side is getting really interesting. I think Vast actually was talking about some of that in one of their recent releases, and that's going to be hugely important. So we've talked about.
They've definitely set their sights on solving the holistic problem of AI data, right? And they're going well outside of the scope of storage, I would suggest at this point, and trying to do much more. And you can go on to your next topic, but I do think before the day is out, we need a fresh meme for this with Denzel instead of training data, and just see what you can work up on that.
I'm sure our Discord will get right on it.
But wait, actually, I know I just said you could go again, but just a reminder for anyone listening in or watching the video on YouTube, we're also streaming this live right now to our Discord audience. So if you want to participate in the conversation, if you want to help tune my conversation with our interview guests, absolutely, you can submit questions, interact in real time, and we're doing another podcast, pretty much right after this one, that we'll be doing that. So keep up the conversation. Jordan's already peppered in a couple questions. It really does give us a new flavor for these podcasts. We're excited about that. But carry on, Jordan.
Yeah, I'm loving getting the real-time feedback and getting to talk to everybody. Where you totally distracted me. I need a notepad when we do these from now on. We did this last time too.
We were talking a lot about hardware.
The density, right, and the shared storage. So when we look at our specific configuration, this will make a lot more sense to everybody when they read the article about this Kioxia storage and our GPU workstations being moved into the data center. And you start talking about the massive amounts of checkpoints and different model files and different iterations that you can work through, getting that ultra high speed performance to be able to save that and then share it out to the team. That's the other thing that's extremely valuable. We mostly work in a vacuum, so to speak, right? So it's me and Kevin in the lab, banging our heads against servers.
We got a new intern.
Sometimes code.
We've got a new intern today, so you got that guy to
there we go.
Next.
And every once in a while, some usable code comes out of that process. So, but when you start looking at this and thinking about it from an enterprise scale and version control, and hey, you know what? That model checkpoint that you made 3 days ago, whatever you did there was way better than the crap we're making today. Let's go back to that and work on that. And just having that shared across in speeds of that caliber is awesome. And I kind of touched on this at the end of that article too, because of the speed that the ConnectX cards provide back to the storage server. It's effectively like retrofitting PCI Gen 5 SSD speeds into older servers or workstations that, they've got perfectly fine GPUs. RTX 8000s are what, 3-4 years old now, and they're still plenty relevant for training and for AI. They've got boatloads of HBM in them. But those platforms don't have, maybe they don't even have NVMe bays on the front, or I think our Lenovo's don't have NVMe on them, but we basically have retrofitted that in there. So that was another really cool benefit to that project. And I think that's going to be a huge area of focus. I think. Yeah, I don't want to get too speculative here because we end up talking about tape here in about 5 minutes, but it's
tape libraries for AI. I'm actually headed out to Denver in a couple weeks to visit with Quantum, so I'm sure they would be over the moon if we started talking about tape fueling AI innovation.
Well, tell them I'll dust off my i500 as soon as they send some updated drives. We've got, I mean, this is so back to kind of again, once you started this with the whole BI, business intelligence, analytics, big data stuff, right? AI, as we call AI, is so all encompassing of all of those disciplines and all of those fields, especially when you start bringing in the HPC requirements. It's really going to be a big unifier of technologies over the coming years, and it's going to be more and more interesting. The Grace Hopper super chip is one that I'm excited to get hands on with. Hopefully in the near future here. In getting this stuff all pulled together and into something really crazy, it's really cool to watch.
Well, we just put out the article last night on the ML Perf scores from Grace Hopper 200, and yeah, it's pretty wild what's available there. But we're getting a little long here, but I do want to get one more comment from you on this. And you know what? If you guys love this AI chat, we'll do this again and talk about the rawness of what we're experiencing in real time as we try to solve these problems, and then also what the vendors are telling us in terms of their AI enablement in their solutions or for their customers. But we did a piece with OVH Cloud US on their GPU instances, and actually that's the next podcast that we'll be recording is with OVH Cloud. They had some V100s they exposed to us, and I think this is really an interesting dynamic, and you don't have to go deep here, but just give me your 30 seconds on your take on where cloud can be beneficial for AI. Getting access to some of this gear is really hard or really expensive, or potentially both. The cloud can solve some of those problems for us, not without cost, but can solve it with immediacy, if nothing else. What's your high-level take on what we did with OVH and any findings there that are worth highlighting from that review?
If you've got, I see OVH fitting in a really good, rapid push to market. I've got this model and I need to get it up live on the internet doing some inferencing. And it's so affordable. If you can fit into the memory limitations of the V100 on whatever work someone may be doing, then I think it's great. And if you are just someone studying and trying to learn how to get into this, how to interact with CUDA, how to work, how to work in the Linux Ubuntu server environment, and working with different driver versions, the ability to just turn on and turn off and delete and spin up and spin down all of those, those instances is extremely valuable. I think I recall it's 88 cents per hour. So, if I'm studying this or I'm trying to learn this as a developer or someone who's going through school, and maybe all I've got is, a lower power laptop or desktop at home that can't really handle these tech, 88 cents an hour. They don't require, I don't think they don't require any sort of like big upfront payment. You can do hourly billing. If you watch it and you kind of get in there, do your work, turn it back off, you can get access to some of the cutting edge, toolkits, libraries, SDKs, and all that for very cheap to help supplement. As long as you go in with a plan, I think it's super affordable, and you don't just turn it on and leave it on and forget about it. Get hit with a $2,000 cloud.
Don't forget about it. Your credit card company will alert you to that.
Yeah, but I mean,
yeah. Well, we don't have to go real deep there. I just wanted to highlight that we do have a review on the GPU instances where Jordan walks through how it works, some of these things, and some of the hands-on testing he did. And that is the next podcast. So by the time you hear this one, that one will be in the can and will be next up. So if you're interested in some of these concepts around AI in the cloud, that should be hopefully a very good conversation. I encourage you to check that one out. Jordan, I've got to cut you off on this one, but this has been a great conversation. And like I said, we're pumping these live into Discord now, so join our Discord if you need that link. It'll be in the description of the show, or it's linked in the top right corner of our website, storageview.com. Check it out and join the conversation. We want to hear from you. Until then, Jordan, thanks for doing this again, buddy.
Yep, good to talk to you, Brian.
All right, thank you.